Okay, quick little video on Ruger SR40C slide disassembly. I noticed there was not many videos regarding detail stripping the slide, and it's really not that difficult, but there are lots of little pieces that can be easily lost, so don't do what I'm doing and be doing it on a bed, but I'll explain it briefly. No tripod, just using my cell phone, so apologies in advance. Most of this is pretty easy and obvious. For instance, the loaded chamber indicator has a simple roll pin holding it in, and of course there's going to be a spring back here. I did not bother taking this out on this one because there was really no reason to. But you can see right there, there's like a little dark cap, and that is a round head for the pin that holds the extractor. And you can see right there in the corner above where that little dimple next to the 40 is. And, of course, besides your striker assembly, there is part of the safety for the firing pin, and then there's also the firing pin stop. Both of these will come out after you remove the firing pin. The firing pin block will actually shoot out because it's spring-loaded, so be careful. As far as removing the backplate, there are two holes. The main hole you have to worry about is this little bitty one. There's a small plunger in there. And the big one, there is, of course, a plunger for this. And I should also note the only way you're going to get this entire assembly out is if the firing pin is in its furthest forward position, which you can see right now it's not, otherwise it'd be protruding. So the first thing is, you can reset your striker by pushing up on that. You can hit this one here. It moved down a tiny bit, and hopefully I can do this. I don't know if you can tell or not, but that firing pin has moved forward some. Now you can see it. You want to then push the firing pin block, and when you do, the firing pin will start to protrude through the breech face. When it's at this furthest downward position, you'll see the striker bar is almost touching the slide. It is at this point you could then push in this small detent with a punch or anything that'll fit. It's under a fair bit of spring tension, but nothing crazy. In this particular gun, it did not shoot out because this gun was extremely dirty. However, I would not be surprised if it did try to shoot out on other guns. But before you get that far, you really need to take off the extractor. So, I may have to set my phone down, but I will do my best to show you what's going on here. Also of note, when you go to reassemble the extractor, you have to press and hold this safety in, and the firing pin block, and of course that means the firing pin block has to be installed. So the first thing you remove and the last thing you reinstall is the extractor. Again, the loaded chamber indicator can be done at any time, should not matter. However, I did not remove it, so just word of advice. Very simple. Just take any halfway decent punch and start pushing, and you'll feel it. What I usually do is I'll try to push it, and I will compress the actual extractor against the frame. 1 second. Okay, it'll only go part way, as you can see here, because the pin has a step in it that is being retained by the extractor. So you must press it inward, press the extractor in towards the slide. And once you do, the pin will basically fall out. It's free right now. It's just sitting in there. So we will take our pin, one second. Okay, pin is out, extractor is free. Now on this gun, when I did it the first time before this video, the spring on the extractor stuck to it again because of how dirty it was. But don't expect it to. And you can hopefully see, if I get my, there we go. There's a step in the pin, and of course the round head that goes on top. Continuing on, I'm going to put all my parts in a little cap. You then just take your extractor. There is part of a hook in the breech face, so slide it forward and around, just like that, forward and around. And there it is. It can only be installed one direction. There's part of that hook, those two tabs that extend out. You have to be sure when you reinstall this, you put those in first and then pivot backwards. If you try to just put it in straight like a normal extractor, it's not going to work. It won't install. And of course, this spring, which in my case did stick to the extractor and almost fell out again. Spring. Okay, extractor complete. Here is part of the firing pin stop. You could see there. When the firing pin is in its forwardmost position, it holds that firing pin stop into that position. If you take the firing pin and pull it back, you'll see it pops down. That prevents install of the extractor. So be sure your firing pin is installed and completely bottomed out and protruding through the breech face. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. All right, moving on. I want to get it punched, and to hold the punch into the small hole, you don't have to worry about the big one, just the small one. Okay, just like this. It doesn't have to be super strong, but all you're going to do is just push that down and work it back slowly. We'll do that partially, and I'll come right back. Okay, what I did was I held the slide in one hand and held the punch in with my other hand, and it's partially removed right now, as you can see. The retaining pin and plunger are behind the plastic still, and like I said, on a cleaner gun, they might launch out, so heads up. You just pull this out slowly. And there's your pin. And there's your backing plate. Simple as that. Again, I'm going to put this right there. Once you're down to this point, my plunger, again, did not launch, but be careful because it could. Something you can go ahead and do is pull back carefully on your firing pin, and your firing pin block will probably try to come out. Which it just did. It launched itself. So don't do that. Put your hand over it, because it literally hit my phone. If it wouldn't have hit my phone, I could have been in serious trouble. There's that. And your firing pin is now free. The only thing left is the secondary firing pin block and the firing pin itself. Your firing pin itself, it will literally just slide right on out the back. You'll have to depress that button on the block to get it the rest of the way out, and it will just fall right out. Once the firing pin is out, this piece is free, and there is a spring on one side of it. Mine is stuck in there. Not sure if yours will be, so keep in mind it can come free. Again, I'll put this in my box, and here's your firing pin. Of course, it can only be installed one way. Did my best to control focus here, sorry about that. Of course, it can only be installed one way, and it can probably be disassembled, but I really see no reason to disassemble it. Just give it a good cleaning, clean off any carbon, and give it a little bit of oil. Simple. Now, if you have removed your iron sights, which I wouldn't really recommend, but if you have, all that's left is your iron sights, your plunger, and in my case, my loaded chamber indicator. Everything else is removed. This is a chunk of steel, otherwise. So all you got left is, in my case, loaded chamber indicator, iron sights, and that little plunger. I did try to remove that plunger, although I didn't force it because I didn't want to stretch the spring, and it did not come out. So your results may vary. That's just how mine came out. And I'll go ahead and do reassembly, but it's pretty straightforward. Of course, the first thing you got to do is get your large firing pin block, and keep in mind this can only go in one direction. With the slide down here, with it facing me, where the barrel would be, the spring goes to the left-hand side. Although if you're used to seeing it unassembled, that would probably make sense, seeing how one side is noticeably longer than the other. That longer side is the one that has the spring. So you just simply drop that into place. I'm not even sure if it'll fit the other direction. It doesn't appear that it will. That just kind of goes in there and slides up and down. Simple. Next, your firing pin. Load your firing pin from the back. Make sure your tab is down. And it will only go so far before it begins to hit. Pull it back, compress, and insert. Firing pin is installed partially. The next thing I'd recommend you do is installing the firing pin block safety, which is the little round one that flew out at me. For this, all you'll have to do is just take it, line her up, drop it in place. However, you will have to make sure your firing pin is out slightly, like mine is currently. If not, maybe even further out. A lot of this you can do by feel. Yep, you got to pull it out a little bit further. Then compress it. My middle finger is compressing. And pull down. Okay. That is now being retained by the firing pin. It's not ideal, but it is holding it. And keep in mind the thing is spring loaded, so if you somehow fumble and pull that striker back, it's going to go flying. Don't do that. Now, since our firing pin block safety, trying to focus here, is installed, you'll see it's now blocking our extractor. It should be further in there to clear the extractor. Hoping you can see that groove right smack in the middle of the screen. It's black. Pretty easy fix for that. Go ahead and prep your slide for installation of the extractor. In my case, that just simply means getting the extractor out, orienting it correctly, and getting the spring of said extractor. There it is. I'm going to take my spring and install it right here. So my spring is already installed. It's not captive and it can fall forward. Be careful. So you may want to have the bore end up higher. Like I mentioned previously, you have to hook this front section first. So we'll take this, we'll simply drop it like we were going to load an empty casing and pivot backwards. That's all you got to do. Just be sure your spring is where it's supposed to be. There's a little indexing knob on the extractor. Be sure your spring is inside of there. And because I'm trying to do this through a phone, I just dropped the spring. So be careful, take your time, don't mess it up. Okay, spring right there, plain as day. It's been hooked in the front. All right, good stuff. Now, if you try to compress it right now, it's not going to go. That's because our firing pin block is blocking it. Now, that snap, I hope you just heard it, made everything line up. Now you can see that pin is ready to go in there. So I'm going to pause this real quick and drop that in partially. Okay, I've dropped it in partially. As you can see, it's kind of canted over. Keep in mind, this is a step pin, so you're going to have to compress the ejector against the slide and push the pin in. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, it's now reinstalled. It may not fully seat deeply, but as long as it's being retained, you're good to go. You could simply check that by seeing if it's flush with the bottom, which in my case it is. Again, it's the one right there above the 4-0. That's it. Shouldn't require a punch, but it doesn't really hurt because that should just fall right into place. It's not a roll pin after all, it's a captive pin. So all you got left to do is this monkey back here. This thing can be a bit of a pain because you do have to ever so slightly compress this big part of the firing pin spring and the little bitty tiny captive pin, spring. What I did last time was I had a larger brass punch, and I actually took this, which I'm not even about to attempt this one-handed, but I took this, pushed both of them downward at the same time, and then slid the back piece in, and it went right on. That's arguably the hardest part of this entire reassembly, is this back piece. And like I said, if yours is clean, that thing may come flying out, so be very careful, take your time. I'm going to now reassemble mine partially so you can see what to look for. Okay, I've got it mostly reinstalled. Again, you just got to keep them both compressed. Take your time with it. The piece is plastic, don't force it. And there we go. Once that's popped into place, you're set. Your slide is reassembled and complete. One thing to keep in mind when you go to reinsert it, you want to be sure, because if you click this button, and then, rather, that safety, and then this safety, back to back, your firing pin will be further forward than normal. It's entirely possible this will not affect operation, and it will go back together properly. However, it's probably good practice to manually pull the striker back. That way it resets both safeties, and there's no chance that it's in a condition the gun was not originally designed for. So, by having that back, again, both the firing pin is back inside of the firing pin channel, but there's two different levels. First level, second level. So be sure when you pull this back, you get two good positive clicks. They're kind of real close together, so you may not hear them, but if you cannot see the firing pin like at all without a flashlight, you got it. Because in the first position, which I'll show you now, it will be right close to the edge. You can actually see it just very faintly right now. And of course, the second position, it's actually protruding and sticking through. So, again, just to go back, simply pull your firing pin back, and when it's back, you're good to go. And that's how you reassemble a SR40C slide. This most likely applies to other models as well, but all I know for certain is it definitely works for the one I have. I'll do my best to answer any questions anyone has.